In February of 2019, I had the privilege of sitting down and talking with Dr. Jeremy Bond. Dr. Bond recently graduated from the Doctor of Educational Technology program at Central Michigan University. In this interview, he shares some of his experience as he went through the program and offers some advice to students considering joining the DET program. We're going to go ahead and dive right into the interview where we're talking about Dr. Bond's current occupation.
Right now, I'm interim director of e-learning for Central Michigan University, which basically means I still officially have my former position, which is manager of LMS instructional support.
What is your educational and professional background?
Um, I've worked for the last 20 years in staff positions right here at CMU. Most of that time was focused on either the development or support of online and distance learning. But over time, as the same systems used in those capacities morphed into places where they were used by a lot of campus faculty, my role kind of grew across the institution, as did that of my teams. Other kinds of professional things I've been involved with is have included adjunct instruction. I taught for 16 years at community college and have taught as an adjunct in CMU's College of Education and Human Services since about 2012. I also had a real estate license for a number of years, did some technology consulting for a long time, and also before I ever started teaching in for-credit settings, I taught in adult ed enrichment programs. So lots of education-centric professional experiences. Educationally, I started out a traditional undergrad in the 90s. Found that taking 4 and 5 and 6 classes at once really wasn't my thing. My transcript's a train wreck in some respects. I stopped out a couple of times. Ultimately, it took almost 11 years for me to wrap up my bachelor's degree. But then I earned an MA from CMU. In about 18 months, I went through the program really pretty quickly, and then took a couple of years off after that, and then started the doctorate in the fall of 15. So that there is hopefully a fairly brief professional and educational summary.
Yeah, very interesting. So what led you to enroll in the DET program?
I had honestly been waiting for it to start since I'd finished the MA. When I was a grad student in that program, the program director at the time had alluded to the potential of he and his colleagues creating an add-on, a doctoral program meant to pick up essentially where the master's program left off. Those things take time, and I had made a deal with myself, so to speak, that if in fact they ever pulled a Doctor of Educational Technology program together, and that I was still in a position to get through it before I turned 40, I would give it a go. Over the years in between, there was quite a bit of talk with some of the other faculty to possibly do the PhD or the EDD, which I wasn't necessarily opposed to. And those are great programs, and I have friends and colleagues who have been through both. But I really was waiting for the DET. So what drew me to it was the positive experience I'd had with that same core of faculty going through the MA. So I knew that I could potentially have another good experience and come out the other side of it as a doctor. So it was an easy choice.
Awesome. So did you just graduate in 2018?
I did. I was a December 18 grad. I was the second person in our cohort across the finish line. There were 7 of us that walked in December, but one of us was technically an August grad. So she was out in front by head and shoulders easily of the rest of us. But then I was the second person to defend successfully my dissertation. I like that. Being second place was pretty good.
What was your experience as you went through the DET program?
It mostly very positive. I've randomly met others who have wanted to talk about what I thought of it, and I have a lot of great things to say. I don't think I was an especially well prepared doctoral student early on. That's on me. That's certainly not on anybody in the program. And in fact, I'd use that as a platform to say, once I made some of my shortcomings or insecurities known to my advisor, to some of my other faculty, they were phenomenally supportive and transparent in saying, well, have you thought about this? And are you doing that? And have you ever been shown how to read a journal article? And here's how I do it. And so some of the things that I guess could be described as modest struggles fairly early on were reconcilable. Uh, but the program, my earliest memory in the first class, getting a paper back and the feedback that the professor offered was, in terms of word count, longer than my paper. So it felt like a gut punch at first, and talking about it with classmates and realizing that they'd gotten similarly detailed feedback, beginning to see that not as an affront but as an investment that this professor was making in all of us. That one of my closer friends in the cohort kind of pointing out that, look, you're in this to become something you aren't today. This is the feedback we want. It can't just all be affirmation. And so my experience was complex but wonderful. I really came out at the end of the little over 3 years, with a different orientation toward constant improvement, a different orientation toward receiving constructive critical feedback, new, I think, improved, can't be new and improved. So I had some new and some improved skills in the way that I even had friends who had gone through other programs in years prior. One in particular went through MSU's program, and she was half teasing me, half complimenting me, but the crux of her comment was, "Whoa, you really sound educated now." And I said, well, thank you. I'm going to just overlook the fact that I must have sounded like an idiot in the past. She didn't mean it that way, of course, but it changes you. Studying at that level, if it doesn't change you, I would say either you've chosen the wrong program, or, and this is sort of cliche, you're not doing it right, because it changes you for the better.
So, let's talk about your dissertation a little bit. Can you tell me what your dissertation was about and why you came to choosing that particular topic?
Absolutely. And I was one of the wild ones, I guess you could say, because we were encouraged to fashion our practicum subject matter into our dissertation. And some of my classmates did that. That was sort of the plan A route. I didn't. I basically abandoned my practicum. I felt like I had done all I could do with the subject that I'd originally focused on, and went back to a topic that I had poked around the edges of it throughout the program. And basically, I studied the field of instructional design through practicing or practicing a practitioner's lens. And it was survey-based research, and ultimately I had almost 250 subjects respond, all of whom either were instructional designers, supervising instructional designers, or working at least part of the time as an instructional designer. And I asked them a number of things, kept the survey instrument reasonably concise, but had some branching scenarios built in, asked them about their education, background, collected their gender, years of experience in the field, probed into the areas of kind of the models and theoretical frameworks that they felt grounded or supported their own work. Went pretty far into the realm of leadership, whether they, in two specific areas, I suppose, whether they as respondents were being pulled in other directions. So it's pretty rare to find an instructional designer, frankly, who is only doing instructional design. Usually they're doing some media development or supervision, or coding or tech support, or all of those things and other things. But most of them are positioned in some sort of supervisory capacity too. And so I think you wanted to know maybe how I ended up on that topic. So I started this program in August of 2015, and in the spring of 2016 is when I accepted the interim promotion, the role that I'm in now that I mentioned at the beginning of our interview. And part of that job was assuming supervision of a small team of instructional designers. And the team they're brilliant people. The team is all still in place, wonderful people, but they were struggling with the volume of work, with just the nature of things, what was being asked of them, with no new resources. And so I developed a pretty, I think, organic curiosity about their work and the way it was coming in. And this was kind of an interesting nuance, I suppose, with respect to my dissertation. Um, Catherine Durkin, my chair and advisor, she was crystal clear that I needed to be very careful because this project was not about my work. So, if you feel a disconnect between everything I've shared up to this point, this situation of kind of inheriting this ID team, it's deliberate. I had to filter out, set aside all my emotion and preconceived notions and things, just focus on the research. But there was definitely at least this tacit kind of connection back to my real life work, which, frankly, to jump back a question, the experience of the DET is a focus on becoming a real researcher, but also in a way that's practical, pragmatic. We can tie it back to our real work. Definitely assets in terms of the program there too.
So, after you've completed your dissertation, has studying it had any direct impact on your professional life? I know you just mentioned that there was a purposeful disconnect between the two, but when you go full circle, was there something that I guess came to fruition from that dissertation that positively affected your professional life?
I suppose that there were some findings that affirmed some things that I had done with the team here. I and my this wasn't just me. A lot of what I did was informed by the work of a committee that I had been part of the year prior, that in part was looking at CMU's um, strategies, let's say, as they related to creating more online courses and programs. And so I implemented a lot of things with the team long before my project that involved deliberately stripping away functions that were in their way, that had nothing to do with instructional design, and finding other more suitable homes for some of those functions. And that really, their capacity in terms of performing instructional design work increased notably, turnaround times improved. And so finding in my research that so many instructional designers really are bogged down doing maybe a dozen other things in addition to their work as designers in some cases. I think the top respondent indicated 11 other areas of duty, which is just mind boggling. If you take a job as an electrician and suddenly they're asking you to do general carpentry, plumbing, billing, receiving, all these other things start to creep in. And you say, well, how much electrical work are you really doing these days? And you say, oh, about an hour a week. Well, that's an oops, right? Operationally. And so there were some affirmations, I think, in the data. Some of, and this I think might bleed into your next question if I've understood it correctly, but some of the findings I think offered me some insight into how the individuals on the team found their way into the field, because it's not an area like, if you're going to be a medical doctor, then you've gone through a medical doctor program. You have an MD, right? That's not true of instructional designers universally. There is not a standard education. Increasingly, I think the standard is becoming an MA in instructional tech or instructional design, but there isn't a licensure. There's not a board that declares you an instructional designer. And so that made the group's background make a bit more sense to me. I think there were other things, but those are probably the major takeaways and connections.
All right. So, yeah. After completing your dissertation, have you had any publications or any presentations professionally based on the dissertation work, and any interest outside of outside of just the dissertation
It's
itself?
it's been a funny journey, Justin, because I was one of the cohort members who was pretty anti, in terms of publishing and getting into the whole scholarship realm. And I was kind of vocal early on that I'm not here to become an article publisher and on the presentation circuit. I just want to be a doctor. And there were a couple of us in that camp, and some stayed there, that they really doesn't interest them. But the reason I say it's been a funny journey is the dissertation, we were allowed to structure it as three separate articles so that we had kind of a leg up if we took that route right out of the gate. So one of my three artifacts has already been published. Another is pending with a journal now, and we're in the process of formatting the third to get it submitted. But it's really going to be the big achievement if we get it where we want it. We're hoping to target gender and society, which would be remarkable to get into that journal. So I'm trying not to build myself up for crushing disappointment. But I got a couple presentations out of my independent inquiry project, my practicum, that I didn't anticipate. National level stuff at EDUCAUSE, which was pretty awesome. I've done, now that I understand the process of publishing a little bit better, before I was even all the way through the program, one of the faculty, Dr. Zhang, reached out and offered to kind of help me through the process, and we co-published a paper I had written in his course. So technically, I was published before I graduated. I collaborated with a couple of CMU faculty on another piece that was published just this last month. So yeah, there's been some definite outside reach, even though in hindsight it's a little ironic given my earlier stance on this particular issue.
Fantastic. Very interesting. So what is the impact of the DET program or even the degree had on your career?
I don't know yet. My sense is that it's been positive. I think, given that, the role that I'm in, the desired qualifications are a graduate degree, but the preferred qualifications include a doctorate. I assume it's advantageous. The role I'm in is actually being consolidated with another vacant director position, which is currently open for applications, and I've applied. So I'm hopeful that the degree has positioned me well. I have flirted with the idea of trying to get back into doing more adjunct teaching, but it remains to be seen, I guess, for me, how the DET floats in that space. It certainly seems to be accepted and useful in the publishing world. I've not had anyone respond to my proposals asking what is a DET. It's been easier with my family to just let them tell people I have a PhD, quite honestly, than trying to get into the nuances of the difference. So I guess a concise response would be the sense I have is that it's had a positive impact. But in terms of a tangible measure, I don't know yet.
Okay. So as you reflect back on your experience through the DET program, what, if you could give students who are just starting the DET program or students who are thinking about starting the DET program some advice, what would it be?
I could go on a lot about this, as I'm kind of done with some of the other questions, but I'll keep it to, I guess, two, maybe three pieces of advice. So the program, you go through with a cohort for a reason. Make friends with those people. Take advantage of that community, um, and work the buddy system. It was extremely valuable to me for the purposes of commiserating, for sharing strengths, for mitigating weaknesses, that I was part of a cohort. So don't be an island. Even as more of an introverted person, I tried to break past my comfort zone, and I've got some lifelong friends out of the deal. And I think they've been there for me, and hopefully in some capacities I've been there for them. The other piece of advice, or the second big thing, I guess I would say, is be open with the faculty. Um, they're a deeply committed bunch, but they're also innovators, and they're pioneers in their own experiences in their own doctoral studies. For the most part, were more traditional. And so there's sometimes momentary disconnects between what life was like as a single 20 something working on a PhD versus what it's like as a 30, 40, or 50 something with all those other kinds of life things going on. But they're open to hearing, or to taking requests like, hey, can I get just another day with this? Or, I remember being given opportunities, even when the feedback was mostly good, of a redo. They're not a grade obsessed bunch of faculty. They're really committed instead to what I think matters more, and that's growth and development in the students. But if you don't open up and be clear about your needs, they're not mind readers. And so I would say engage in the dialogue, and not just about I need this or can I do that, but really prepare to invest, which I guess is maybe my third piece, or my part B, is that you've got to be ready to knit this into your life. It is not going to fit in if you say, well, I can give the doctorate program, I can give the doctoral studies Sunday mornings. You're not going to make it. It really, and I had to learn this. I had to drag my books and notes. This was Dr. Weibel's advice. Take it to your children's swim class. Take it on the road trip to visit the grandparents or the in-laws. Take it on vacation. Bring it with you to the doctor's waiting room. Bring it to the office. You got your work briefcase, you got your class briefcase, and just make it an appendage, because 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there. I did commit big blocks of time. 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. on weekend mornings became like the steady time frame. But I think a lot of the work got done in the wee hours of the evening, and a lunch hour here and there, early mornings, 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. The point being that it was knitted into my life. You won't be successful if you push it in a corner, especially if it's a corner you don't visit very often. So a little bit of a metaphor in there, but those would be my three big things. Leverage the community, be open with the faculty, and thread your involvement in the program into your whole life.
Awesome. So do you have any last thoughts?
Other than to be sure that I thank you. This is fun for me. The other little contributions I've made, I really enjoy a chance to share what a remarkable experience it was. And I appreciate the chance to do that. So I don't think I have any other thoughts directly about the DET. I think by now it's probably clear to anyone reading or listening that I loved it. It's a great experience, and I think it meets the needs of a wide variety of potential students.